our channel, and in this video we're going to discuss the most important events that took place during the previous 12 hours. We have a lot of very interesting updates, so let's start. And first we're going to talk about another massive missile and drone attack that took place during the previous night between the 27th and the 28th of September of 2025. The sources are saying that this was the biggest attack since the beginning of the special military operation. So let's start and let's discuss everything in details. And first let's talk about the statement. And this is the statement that was made by Zelensky just several hours before Russians launched this massive attack. Zelensky stated that if Russians threaten a blackout in the capital of Ukraine, they should know that there will be a blackout in the Russian capital as well. So it's most likely the Russians accepted the challenge and the Russians began massive missile attack. Later we got this picture, and here we can see the approximate routes of Russian attacks. As you can see, the Russians were using drones, the Russians were using Kalibr missiles, the Russians were using cruise missiles, and the Russians were using ballistic missiles and hypersonic missiles. The Russians used every type of caliber they have, and the most important, the Russians, as you can see according to this picture, mainly attacked the central part of Ukraine, the cities of Kiev, Belaya Tsarkva, so the Kiev region. So this is exactly that was attacked by Russia. Furthermore, we have another concentration of fire. The city of Zaporozhye was also attacked by Russians, and in this case the Russians were attacking the city of Zaporozhye with Kalibr missiles that were launched from the Black Sea. And during the night we were receiving lots of photos and videos of consequences of attacks, so let's discuss them in details. For example, in this video we can see the consequences of another Russian attack in the area of the city of Kiev. Some building was completely destroyed. The sources are saying that according to information they have, this building was used by Ukrainians for military purposes. The building was completely destroyed till ruins. Maybe this building was occupied by special forces of Ukraine or something like this. As for now, we haven't received any report from the Minister of Defense of the Russian Federation regarding the task, regarding the targets, and regarding the quantity and number of missiles that the Russians used. So this is the same building, but this time from another angle. As you can see, the entire black micro-district, small micro-district of the city of Kiev was destroyed. This micro-district, as you can see, was surrounded by walls, which means that this area was protected most likely, and something very interesting and special, most likely the Ukrainians were hidden there. Furthermore, as we discussed, the Russians attacked the city of Zaporozhye. As for the city of Zaporozhye, we also have some videos of consequences. This time we can see multi-storage building, a multi-storage building that was damaged by missile or by drone. As you can see, the building was set on fire, and later we got another picture where we can see the same building but by the morning. So most likely this missile was trying to hit something else, but for some reason the missile attacked the building. And the Russians attacked another city in the Kiev region, and we are talking about the settlement by the name of Belaya Tsarkva. Very important city as a Ukrainian logistic hub, and in this video we can see Russian drone or cruise missile that attacked the mall. The city mall in the central part of the city, this building was damaged, the building where people go for shopping, go for buying some foods, clothes, and many other different things, but for civilian purposes. Maybe the Ukrainian military authorities were using this building, or at least its warehouse, for military purposes to storage weapons or something like this. We don't know for sure, but this building was also damaged. And the sources are saying that the Russians attacked the city of Starokonstantinov, where Ukrainians might keep some F-16 aircrafts for air defense purposes. So this is the picture of explosion in the western part of Ukraine. So now, summarizing everything, we can say that that was a very powerful attack. The Ukrainians, by the time I started making this video, still hadn't published any reports about the work of their air defense. We don't know for sure how many missiles and drones the Russians use. We will clarify these numbers during the next, let's say, video. As of now, we just have this picture. So the biggest attack was carried out. Today we will see about the consequences and more updates about the situation. And most likely during the day, the Russians Russians and Ukrainians will reveal additional details about this massive and probably the biggest attack since the beginning of the special military operation. Another important detail is that the Russians used not just the biggest number of drones during this wave of attack, the Russians also used the biggest number of missiles. You know that usually Russians use, let's say, 500 or 600 drones and just 20 or 40 missiles, and this is the maximum number of missiles that the Russians use. But the sources are saying that this time there were a significant number of missiles, up to 60 or maybe even more. So when combining missiles and drones, this might be indeed the biggest attack ever since the beginning of the special military operation. Now let's move further and let's discuss the situation on the ground. During the previous 24 hours, the Russians once again managed to improve their positions. And first, let's talk about the Zaporozhye direction, where Russians continue their offensive operation in the direction of the Poltavka and Uspenovka fortified areas. And today, for the first time since this offensive operation began, we start receiving updates of how Russians with FPV drones began clearing positions of the armored forces of Ukraine on the territory of Uspenovka fortified area. In this video, we can see how Russians were attacking with FPV drones positions of the armored forces of Ukraine to the east of the Uspenovka and Poltavka fortified areas. One of the attacks took place exactly in this area, which means that the Russians began clearing this territory with the purpose to send units, to send troops with the purpose to dig in deeper in this part of the settlement, and from this foothold the Russians may try to move further in the western and the northwestern and the southwestern directions. The same story we got from the area of responsibilities of the 29th and 36th armies of the armored forces of the Russian Federation. In this video we can see how Russians were bombing the forest around the settlement of Velika Mikhailovka, how Russians with FPV drones were attacking positions of reinforcements that arrived in this area several days ago. Most of these episodes took place in these fields. The Russians continue preparation before moving further also in the northwestern direction. So we see that for the first time, basically since the beginning of the Russian offensive, we began receiving reports, more and more reports of Ukrainian positions, which means that Ukrainians began showing at least some resistance to the armored forces of the Russian Federation. Now let's talk about the Pokrovsk direction, where Russians and Ukrainians continue attacking each other. And first let's talk about the settlement of Mirnograd. Today several neutral mappers confirmed that during the previous week, during the previous days, the Russians made lots of attempts to attack the eastern flank of the city of Mirnograd, most likely with the purpose to answer the citadel, to answer the city of Mirnograd and to dig in deeper. This information was confirmed by neutral mappers. As of the beginning of the 28th of September, the Russians still haven't managed to answer the city, but the Russians are very close to this. As for the area of breakthrough, the situation remains tense both for the Russians and for the Ukrainians. So I would like to remind you that currently something interesting and unbelievable is happening in this area. The sources are saying that the Russians, despite the fact that they were almost cut in the area of Boykovka and Novotoretsk by Ukrainians, despite the fact that the Russians were almost caught by Ukrainians in Cauldron, they managed to regroup themselves and to carry out very successful attacks. And as a result of this offensive or counter-offensive operations, the armored forces of the Russian Federation managed to improve their positions and basically to capture the settlement by the name of Dorozhnya. This settlement used to be under Russian control during the first wave of offensive operation that started in the August of 2025. Later, Ukrainians managed to restore control over the territory. Now, according to information we have, the Russians recaptured this settlement once again. Furthermore, the Russians improved their positions in the area of the settlement Zatishak. So the Russians currently are trying to carry out stabilization maneuvers with the purpose to encircle those Ukrainians who managed to establish complete control over the settlement by the name of Zapovedne. During the previous days, the Ukrainians carry out a lot of attacks from the settlement of Belitske with the purpose to answer the village by the name of Boykovka and to finally physically cut the small bottleneck of the armored force of the Russian Federation logistic hub, and Ukrainians managed to improve their position significantly. Once again, the Russians captured the village of Zapovedne, but Russians realized that they were at very big risk, so they decided to counterattack. So, for example, this is the situation by the end of the 26th of September of 2025, and this is the situation by the end of the 24th of September. This is exactly the moment when the latest Ukraine attack started. They captured the village of Zapovidne completely by the end of the 25th of September, according to mainly pro-Ukrainian and neutral mappers. And right after this moment, the Russians began stabilization measures with the purpose to restore control over the territory. By the end of the 27th of September, the Russians secured the village of Daryozhne along the railways, and by the beginning of the 28th of September, the Russians tightened the news around Ukraine positions. So it seems that Ukrainians currently in the village of Zapovedne were cut and cordoned by Russians without any chances for evacuation. Now everything depends on Russian logistic and Russian resources, whether they are able to improve their positions and to develop this offensive operation with complete cuts of the Zapovedne pocket, and that's it. If Russians can do this, then the Russians will be able to create a very powerful foothold in the area of breakthrough without any chances for Ukrainians to cut these pockets and to create cauldrons for Russians. Now let's move further and let's discuss the situation in the Siversk-Liman direction, where Russians also continue their offensive operation. According to information we have, the territory between the city of Siversk, Dronovka and Serebryanka is already a huge big gray zone without strong control neither of Russians nor of Ukrainians. But due to the fact that some months ago this territory was under control of the armed forces of Ukraine, we see that the situation for Ukrainians is getting worse and worse, and we see that the Russians in a month managed to improve their position there significantly, which means that this pocket most likely would be probably cleared by Russians in coming days, and then they will answer the settlement of Dronovka itself. So we see that the battle for the city of Siversk is getting closer and closer to us, and most likely this is going to happen within this year. Furthermore, the Ukrainians and Russians continue fighting for the settlement of Yampol. Both sides are sending more and more reinforcements and reserves in this area, but the problem for Ukrainians, the main problem for Ukrainians, is that they need to bring forces through the river of Seversky Donetsk. At the same time, Russians have no problems with logistics, so that is why Russians with drones, with intelligence, can control probably the traffic along the river and to control the situation as well. Now let's move further and let's discuss the situation in the city of Kupiansk. The situation is very difficult for the armed forces of Ukraine. The Russians and the Ukrainians are saying that currently the population of Kupiansk is around 700 residents. Ukrainians, according to information we have, stopped bringing food and supplied to the city itself, so there's going to be nothing of this. When I'm talking about roads, about vehicles, the only way to supply Ukrainians still have is drones, and they continue doing this. The Russians are saying that there are up to 700 or 800 soldiers of the armed forces of Ukraine in the city of Kupiansk. We're not talking about this entire pocket. When talking about the pocket itself, this one most likely up to 5,000 soldiers are there. We're talking just about the city of Kupiansk, just 800 soldiers maximum from Ukrainian side. The Russians continue advancing, and currently the most important clashes are taking place for the Yubileyny micro-district. This one in the western part of the city, the high-rise building area, multi-storage building area, the last one in the city of Kupiansk, and who establish control over the territory will decide what is going to happen with Kupiansk in the future. And most likely, according to the current situation, most likely Ukrainians in the end would be forced to fall back from this area, and it seems that this is going to happen very, very soon. And that's it for the short video. Military Summary channel reminds you to condemn any violence in the world. Thank you for your watching. Subscribe to my channel, put your likes on my Patreon, and have a good day. Bye bye.